Up to now, we've been looking at just linear equations and linear functions. So we're going to look today at some nonlinear functions or equations and see how what characteristics the equation has. Now, we're going to take a look in our first example of y equals x squared. And so just like before, we're going to fill in the table with any values we want. And we're going to use the typical -1, -2, -1, etc. So make up a table of values and sub in the appropriate x value like we did before. So y equals x squared. And remember, sub in brackets, and this is very important, especially in this case, because we have to square the negative and the 2. Now -2 squared means -2 times -2, so then that answer is +4. And this is a common error that you don't square the negative as well. -2 times -2 is +4 because a negative times a negative is a positive. Place the value in your table of values and go on with the next one. Again, sub it in a bracket. Now we've got -1 squared means -1 times -1. And that answer is +1 because another common error, 1 times 1 is 1. Moving on. Sub in again. We're going to put in 0 for our x, and 0 squared, or 0 times 0, is 0. And so we place that into our table of values. Subbing in 1 for x, so we've got 1 times 1 is 1. When we place that into our table of values, and now we're going to sub in 2 for x, and 2 times 2 is 4. And place that into our table of values. And we'll graph this in a moment, but we're going to take a look at another example first, and that'll be y equals 2x squared minus 3. And just as before, we're going to create a table of values, and we're going to use the same values we did before in the y equals x squared example. So again, make up your table of values and sub in -2 or all these values into our equation y equals x squared minus 3. And it's really important here that you follow order of operation. And remember, that's BEDMAS. So the first thing we have to do, and once again, sub it in brackets. So all we've done is replaced the x with -2. We haven't done anything else other than put brackets around the -2 and subbed in for the value of x that we're choosing. So now we've got 3 operations here. We have -2 being squared, which is an exponent. We have multiplication, and we have subtraction. Now, the first thing we have to do, according to BEDMAS, is the exponent. So we have to do -2 squared first, which is -2 times -2, and that's 4. So we sub in, so we do this operation first. Now we have to do the multiplication next. So 2 times 4 is 8. And 8 take away 3, so subtraction is our last operation, is 5. And we sub this back into our table. And so our first point is going to be -2, 5. All right, so sub in again for, now we're going to put x, replace x with -1 in brackets. And it's very important you put the brackets around it. So now, again, we have an exponent that we got to deal with first. -1 squared means -1 times -1, which is +1. Next, we have to do the multiplication. So 2 times 1 is 2. Now we have 2 take away 3, and 2 take away 3 is -1. And we put -1 in our table of values. So now our next point is -1, -1. So we again sub in, and this time we're going to sub 0 in for x, and 0 squared, again we have to do the exponent first, is 0, because 0 times 0 is 0. Now we're going to multiply 2 times 0 in our next step, and anything times 0 is 0. And here we have 0 take away 3. And 0 take away 3 means that we move into the negative numbers and y equals negative 3. So we place that into our table of values. Next example is y equals, we're going to sub in x equals 1, and 1 squared is 1. 2 times 1 is 2, and y equals 2 take away 3 is negative 1. And we sub this in to our table of values. And you'll notice now that we're not getting the same pattern that we did before. And we'll come back to that in just a moment when we do our graph. And so our last value we're going to sub in is x equals 2. So we put that in brackets again. 2 squared, we have to do the exponent first again, is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Take away 3, and y equals 5. And you'll notice that we're getting the same answers here. So we have y equals 5 when x is 2, and we have y equals 5 when x is negative 2. And we're going to take a look at that in just a second on a graph. Alright, so we're going to take a look at what these graphs look like after we have made our table of values. And the first one we're going to look at is our y equals x squared. And to square the value on this program, all you have to do is click this button, and we have y equals x squared. Now when we graph this, it's going to generate the table of values we saw before, and you'll notice we've got y equals negative 2, when x is negative 2, y equals 4. When x is negative 1, y equals 1, 0, 0. And when we plot these, so here's negative 2 and up to 4, and negative 1, 1, and 0, 0 goes through our origin, and 1, 1 is up over 1 and up 1, and over 2 and up 4. Now, we'll take a look at the next example. Y equals 2x squared minus 3, and when we graph that, you'll notice we get the same values we did before here. So negative 2, 5, negative 1, negative 1. So negative 2 and up to 5, it would be right about there. Negative 1 and negative 1 is right about here. And 0, negative 3 was our next point. 1 and negative 1 would be about here, and 2 and 5 would be here. And there's other values that are included that weren't in, that we didn't put in our table of values. So you notice that these are both look like upside down arches, and this has a special name. These are called parabolas. And now you're going to do a series of graphs in trying to determine what characteristics of an equation. And so looking at an equation such as these lets us know whether it's going to be a linear function or a nonlinear function.